Unit 7, Part 3 notes. I can solve quadratic equations by using square roots. So still working on solving quadratic equations. Now we're just going to learn a different method. First off, we have to talk about inverses and which mean opposites. Like addition and subtraction are inverses or opposites. Multiplication and division are inverses. And squares and square roots. So when you have x squared, which is a key marker that you have a quadratic equation, and this is pronounced x squared or x to the second power, we can use the square root to undo that operation. So if we think about that, 3 squared is equal to 3 times 3, which is equal to 9. And if we go over here, the square root of 9 is 3. So they're inverses. They undo each other. But we also have what's called the negative power. So negative 4 squared. When it's in parentheses like that, that means negative 4 times negative 4, which equals 16. So then the square root of 16 is not only 4, but also negative 4. So every square root has 2 values that can be the square of it. So usually we just focus on the positive one. Probably up until this point, you've only focused on the positive ones. However, there are negative answers for your square root. Even if you do it in the calculator, you're only ever going to get the positive one. So if we do 16 and then take the square root of it, we're going to get positive 4. So the positive one is called the principal root. It's just the more commonly used one. However, there is also the negative case as well. So that's going to be an important piece for this lesson. So now, how do we solve a quadratic equation using square roots? So there's a couple steps that we're going to follow. The first one is very similar to how we would solve an equation. We're going to undo the addition and subtraction, undo the multiplication and division. But our goal is to get the x squared by itself. So here's our x squared. We have x squared minus 5 equals 20. So that minus operation, that minus 5, I want to undo it. I want to undo that with a plus 5. The negative 5, positive 5 cancels out. We get x squared equals 20 plus 5 is 25. So now once the x squared is the only thing on one side of the equation, so right now you see we only have this x squared here, nothing else. The x squared is alone. Then we can move to step 2. So step 2 says get the x alone. So now we want to get rid of the squared part of the x. So to do that, we have to undo x squared with the square root. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root of both sides. So the square root of both sides. Square root of x squared is just going to be x. And then the square root of 25 is going to be 5 and negative 5. We need to make sure we add that negative 5 because there's always going to be 2 answers whenever we solve a quadratic equation. So we have x equals 5 and negative 5. So that's what this last piece says. Circle your answer. Include both your positive and your negative version. All right, so let's try another example of that. We have negative 5x squared plus 180 equals 0. So our goal is to get our x squared alone first. So here's my x squared. So I'm going to undo any addition or subtraction first. So I'm going to undo this plus 180 with a minus 180. That leaves us with negative 5x squared on the left, and 0 take away 180 is negative 180. And then next I'm going to undo the multiplication and division. So this multiplication here next to the x squared, that's times negative 5. We're going to undo that with divide by negative 5. So we get x squared equals negative 180 divided by negative 5. That would be positive 36. So we undid our addition and subtraction, undid our multiplication and division. The x squared is all by itself. So now we want to just get the x alone by undoing our x squared with the square root. So we're going to take the square root of x squared and the square root of 36. Square root of x squared is just x. And the square root of 36 is 6 and negative 6. And then to show you that the square root of x squared, so if we take the square root of some number squared, if I replace this x value with any number, it's going to be the number that this is equal to. So I can put 3 here, and you can see that the answer is 3. I can put 4, the answer is 4, 5, 6, 7. If I put the negative value, it's going to come out the positive value just because it's always, the calculator is always going to give you the positive value for the answer, that principal root. But you can see that value is the same. So when we have an x there, our answer would just be x. When we take that square root of x squared, it's just going to eliminate the square. The square root is eliminating the square, leaving us with just x. So that's that mathematical piece behind that. So if that was confusing anybody, why we can do that, that's the reason why. Because square roots undo squares. So when we go from this square root of x squared down here to just x, that's the mathematics behind that. So that's our answer, 6 and negative 6. All right, we have one more example here. 2x squared plus 11 equals 109. So we're going to start by getting that x squared all by itself. So we're going to undo plus 11 with minus 11. We get 2x squared is equal to 98. Then we're going to divide both sides by 2 to get that x squared by itself. We get x squared is equal to 49. And then now to get that x squared by itself, we're going to take the square root of both sides. We're going to take the square root of x squared and the square root of 49. Square root of x squared is just x. Square root of 49 is 7 and negative 7. And that is how you can solve quadratics using square roots. So for your practice, there is an online assignment for you to do. It is included where you found this note sheet in this video. So make sure you go to Schoology, complete the online practice, upload your screenshot, and then you can move forward with your work for this week. If you have any questions, please reach out.